Hey everybody, welcome back to the second episode of the Help Me Parent Podcast. We're back with Dr. Ellen Moore. As always, welcome back.
Thank you.
It's going to be a great episode, and we also have some new moms to the episode with us. Definitely not new moms, so go ahead, introduce yourselves.
I'm Erica, and I have 4 girls, and they are 8, 7, 5, and 3.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
I'm Nadia, and I have 2 kids. Mariah is 4, and Jude is 2.
Yeah, awesome. It's going to be a great episode. We're going to kick it off with a question we like to ask here. What is a funny story you have from parenting? One of the funny things your kids have said, or just something that just keeps you laughing?
Well, recently, my children have figured out that we are talking about what the middle finger means. And
Perfect.
It's really great conversations.
Oh, yeah.
And so through the midst of telling them about it, I talked about how I'm sorry.
No, you're
Just keep going. You're good.
In the midst of the conversation, we talked about how the middle finger is really no different from our other fingers. It's what other people put on the middle finger that makes it bad. And so then, of course, they're like, well, can I not give the middle finger? All this to say, a couple of days later, one of the workers where they are in childcare came down to me and told me, I'm just wondering, did you tell your child that she could flip me off? Because she's been flipping the room off and saying that mom told her that it was fine. So, needless to say, we had a very good conversation that is not what I was telling her. It was rough.
That's a great conversation to have, I imagine. Ugh. Any funny stories y'all have?
One that comes to mind just because I was talking to somebody the other day and it reminded me that, you know, how kids just have a way of putting things in perspective. But I was working on my doctorate, and when I started, the kids were 3 and 5, and they were 10 and 12 when I finished. But somewhere in there, our daughter, she was 5 or 6, but she had heard Philip talking about mommy's going to school and she's working on a doctorate or something like that. And she asked me, so are you going to, once you're finished, are you going to give me my shots? And I said, no, I'm not going to be that kind of doctor. And she said, oh, so you're not the kind of doctor who can actually help anybody. I'm like, yeah, pretty much. Like, thank you for putting it in perspective, but you're right.
All this work.
For nothing.
Yeah.
Can't save lives.
I think of a funny story with us. My daughter's older, and so she was around 2 when or younger than that, actually, when I was pregnant with her younger brother. And so, you know, my belly's growing and baby's growing, and she could talk at a pretty young age. And so I think they're almost exactly 2 years apart. So right before he's born, she just like was talking to me and feeling my belly. And she's like, I have a baby in my belly. I'm like, no, you don't have a baby in your belly. And she really says things with a lot of confidence. I don't know where she gets that from. And we kind of had this disagreement / argument because she's like, no, I really do look. I'm like, no, you don't have a baby in your belly. So it's fun navigating those conversations, trying to explain you don't. It was fun.
Oh, this is such a side note, but I was moving some stuff around today and I walked by the classroom and I was saying hi to her and she kind of like puts her hands on my face. She goes, hi, why are you so sweaty? And I was like, I was moving stuff around. So she really humbled me today, but it was with confidence.
Not afraid to ask.
Oh my gosh. That reminds me of the morning that I was getting ready and Addie looks at me. Well, she didn't look at me, but she goes, Mommy, you look so And then she looks at me and she stops talking. And then I say, what were you going to say, Addie? And she goes, nothing. And then she goes, are you going to wear your hair like that? I was like, she was totally about to tell me I looked beautiful. And it stopped when she saw me.
That's funny.
Kids will humble you. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to start off with a question about boundaries. So, what are some good boundaries to set with your kids, and how do you kind of make them non-negotiable as well?
I think this is one of the big challenges of parenting, and it kind of, a lot of things always boil back down to this issue. One thing I would say about boundaries is, there's no magic formula here. There is no like, okay, if you do this, ABC, or if these are your rules in your house, and this is always what you do, your kids are going to turn out perfect. It doesn't work like that. But the one thing I would say about boundaries is it is important to have some rules or some guidelines or some things that go along with being a member of your family. Mm-hmm. And to not have too many of those. Kids don't need a lot of rules, but they need boundaries. And boundaries are actually what creates security and safety for kids. Mm-hmm. Boundaries do not inhibit their personalities. Boundaries do not stifle them or, squelch their creativity. It actually is what gives them the freedom to actually become all that they were created to be. So keeping them to a few and super simple. Our family, we had 3 basic rules, if you want to have whatever term you want to use. But it was that we obey right away, we're respectful, and we always tell the truth. And pretty much everything could kind of fit under those 3 things. And those were the non-negotiables for us. And those were the things that if you disobeyed, if you were disrespectful, or you didn't tell the truth, that resulted in a consequence immediately. Mm-hmm. The other thing I would say about boundaries is they are only helpful and beneficial to the degree that they are consistently enforced. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you just have to be consistent. And literally every time you have to respond. Mm-hmm. And it can't be dependent on your mood. It can't be dependent on the time of day. It can't be dependent on how busy you are or if you have time to, address it. It just is a part of parenting, and it is the hard part of parenting. Yeah. This is where, the days are long and literally we're about to go to bed and you decide to disobey or, say something ugly or whatever, and it just has to be dealt with. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say that we don't take into account things like, is it right before nap time? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let them have their nap, deal with it after. Mm-hmm. Are they hungry? Mm-hmm. Or, whatever. So we're taking into account some other factors, but being consistent every single time this happens, and that too creates that security and that safety that the kids never have to wonder, oh, am I going to get in trouble for this today? Or is mommy in a good mood, so I'm going to get by with it today? Yeah. And that creates a lot of uneasiness and confusion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How does that kind of come into play when you have like grandparents or they happen to be at somebody's house and they may like kind of step over that boundary line, but you don't happen to be there? Is that something you handle at home? Is that something y'all have had to work with too, whether they're at your in-laws' house or at a friend's house? Kind of where does that cross into?
Well, if you're not there, it's really hard to,
I think
I think it depends on who they're with. I think grandparents can be a great support to saying, hey, tell them this is something we're really working on. If you find that they are not telling the truth or not telling the whole truth, if you would really help us by kind of holding them to that, they can be a great resource. At the same time, if they're with somebody else, to ask them to be the enforcer of your boundaries, that's really not a really fair thing to ask. And so, you know, they're not always going to be with you. So there are going to be things that they get away with maybe at other times. But that's kind of what we're trying to do as parents, is not just say these are the rules and you better do this in this way every single time you're in front of me. We're really wanting to create this heart that it's part of their character that they are obedient, that they're respectful, and they're truth tellers. And so that when they're in these situations or around other people, it just eventually is what comes out of them because it's who they are.
Yeah.
It's not something they do just to not get in trouble, if that makes sense. But I'm sure y'all have insight on what you do with how they are around grandparents.
I'd say recently, like when my parents will come up and help, sometimes it's like an overnight thing for us. And I've realized by learning, I don't expect them to uphold everything that I'm consistent in. But if there's one big thing we're working on at the time, I'll ask them for that one big thing. So for us, and we're still working on it, is if it's bedtime, you're staying in your room, in your bed, and we do a light system. If the light turns a color, you can come out. Again, it's a work in progress, but it helps that they help with that rule, that bedtime is bedtime. Because if she does try it, she tries it on other people.
For sure.
Because she knows the consequences are going to be a little bit different. So that's one thing that's helped. We've just chosen like one thing that we've really been working on and just asked for help with that one thing. And then the other areas are just accountability. We just want her to be kind and make good choices, those kinds of things.
Yeah. I think that's smart.
Yeah, that's great. Do you have anything to add?
We haven't had as much with grandparents. Just my parents live farther away, and it's not come up where I have a lot of it, is with like childcare or people caring for my children longer hours. And that's where, you know, and you have to have trust with those people too. And like, I trust you. But for me, that has come into play where if it comes to my attention, if they feel the need to pull me into it, then that does result in a consequence, because I trust them. I trust their gut. Of course, if there was someone that you're like, I just don't really know you at all, I get that can be different. But for me, I trust you. And if they feel the need to tell me, then you're going to have a consequence. I don't try to tell them how to do it. I let them do theirs. But it's kind of that, for me, the idea of I want them to obey anybody, not necessarily just me. And if they're having a hard enough time, they have to tell me, then I'm going to reinforce what they're doing.
Yeah, that's great. Do you want to touch on one of y'all's questions?
Yeah, I feel like that kind of feeds into it a little bit. One of my things that I'm learning is as they're getting older, they have different adults that come into their life, teachers, and most of them are trusted people like at the church or things because they're not in school yet. But it just made me think about as they're getting older and they go to school and they're around adults or things like that, that I don't always even meet. There's, I worked in a school, so there's administrative staff you don't know. I think one of my questions is how to best explain to a toddler boundaries where they're understanding, just because an adult's telling me this, how do they start, I don't know how to phrase it, but how do they start following that within themselves where they know I do have to obey an adult? Does that make sense? Like a healthy boundary?
Like if an adult was trying to tell them to do something that was wrong?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great question. I think, I think that's one of the gifts of the way childhood works, is when they're youngest and before they can really process all of that they're either in our care or somebody who's very trusted. And so this is the time that we are instilling these principles or these qualities or these rules or character traits or whatever. And we are giving them some context to them when that becomes appropriate. So they say several people put childhood in different categories, but like 0 to age 5, that's when your role is the disciplinarian, and you're just kind of instilling these basic things and their immediate consequences, and you're kind of, this is the rules. And then from ages 5 to 12, you're a trainer. And so at that age, we're giving them a little bit more context. We're kind of giving them the moral reason why. So a couple of things that we did, we would say, that because we're Moors, this is what we do. Or because we're followers of Jesus, this is what we do. And to try to distinguish, okay, if you're a follower of Jesus, then there's a good chance that you are kind and loving and all of those things. But because we're a Moor, this is why we do this. Other people aren't Moors, and that comes into play when they have start playing with friends, and their friends have different rules at their house. And so, well, they don't have to, well, that's okay. They're not a Moor. But you do this because you're a Moor, and you make this choice because you're a Moor, or you're a follower of Jesus, or whatever. So I think that's one piece of it. And then the other piece is that you begin as they get older and go into new environments where there may be adults who have a different belief system or whatever. Say, okay, when you go to school, everyone isn't a Moor. Everyone isn't a follower of Jesus. And so if something happens that you're not sure about, you always go and talk to somebody, an adult there who can help you. And then you always come and talk to mommy or daddy about it. And you just create those lines of communication, and then, just learning as they grow and can process, oh, okay, everybody doesn't pray before they eat, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But there are certain things that, you teach your kids, nobody should ever touch you where a swimsuit covers. Unless it's bath time and mommy or daddy or grandma or grandpa are helping you at bath time, or you're at the doctor and mommy or daddy are there. Other than that, nobody should ever. And if that happens, you always tell mommy or daddy. So there's that. There's the safety side, and then there's the, this is how we do things, but everybody doesn't do those things.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah, that's really great. Do you have one about boundaries?
Yeah. So it's about just the fact, again, as the girls are getting older, and we were in the disciplinarian for so long, but I'm wondering how boundaries change, but at the same time, like you were talking about, we're respectful, we obey, we're honest. Those don't change, as they get older. How does it change though, maybe the way you enforce it, or You know what I mean? Like as they get older, it does look different. You were talking about training versus disciplining. How does that change?
Yeah, I think it does change. I think the expectations stay the same, but the expressions vary as they get older. Part of that has to do with just their development and their cognitive development. Like they can understand things at a whole different level. That it's, you know, you say to a 5-year-old, you always tell the truth. And, you know, if they make up something ridiculous, you know, we all went to the zoo today and, you know, they didn't go to the zoo. You know, it's real black and white. But then as they get older, maybe they didn't say something that didn't happen, but they didn't include all of the information that did happen, you know, and that's part of being honest. And, so you have to kind of explain things at different levels when they reach different levels. So I think your basic expectations don't change, but your conversations change. And even like if we're talking about being respectful, and a 3-year-old tells you no, you ask them to do something and they tell you no, that's going to result in a consequence. An 8-year-old, you tell them to do something and they ask a question. They say, well, do I have to right now? Or I don't really want to do that. And you have to decide, okay, are they being disrespectful, or are they really trying to understand something at another level because they can process it at a different level? And so you have to be willing, I think, to have those conversations when the heart of it is being expressed right. But I would say even to that, what we're after with our kids is their hearts. As Christians or followers of Jesus, we want them to have a heart for Jesus. We also want them to have a heart for other people and to be the kind of person that represents Jesus well, if you're a Christian, represents your family well, but also helps them be the kind of person that's life's gonna go better for them. If there's somebody who is kind and respectful to people, who isn't selfish and always thinking about themselves. So we're really giving them these tools that will help their life go better, not just about don't embarrass me, you know? I think keeping conversations open and possible for our kids is really important, that they can ask, well, the other kids, you've got 4 girls, and maybe everybody's bedtime has been 7:30, and the oldest one is like, well, I'm not tired. Could I stay up a few extra minutes? Is different than, no, I'm not going to bed. I'm not tired. I'm in 2nd grade now. I don't have to go to bed. So we're after the heart. So it's like, you know what? I'm going to let you go to your room because it is 7:30, and I'm going to give you a chance to think about this. And if you'd like to have a respectful conversation about it later, we can certainly do that. Or they're asking respectfully, and it's like, you know what? That's a great question. Let's talk about that. And maybe here's what we've seen. We've seen that you still need a lot of rest, and you feel better in the morning when you go to bed. Or, you know what? I've noticed you've been really having great mornings. Maybe we could move yours 15 minutes later because you may not need quite as much sleep as the younger sisters. So I just think it's so good if we can not keep it so in a box, but because what we want is relationship with our kids. We want them to have a relationship with Jesus, with other people, but with us too. And that's part of having a relationship.
Follow-up question to that. I feel like I tried a lot to have conversations when they were young, like 3, 4, 5, and then it would just result in more screaming. But as you're talking, I'm thinking, and I just want to see what you think. It's like when they're voicing the questions from themselves, like, hey, can I go to bed later? Do you think that's a good marker of, okay, you're ready to start doing those higher level questions versus like, it was like preschool age, like, what? I'm just like, are you? But, like, they're just like, they're so mad at me. And so, and those they were never really fruitful. And so I'm just wondering if maybe that's just to know, like, okay, when are we kind of getting to that point? What do you think there?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think when you're in that disciplinarian stage, that's kind of you're doing it because I said so. That kind of thing. I don't really love using those words in that way. But the point is, I'm the parent, you're the child. And we used to tell our daughter, who we learned very young, that she had an opinion about everything. And I would kind of tongue in cheek say, you're too young and I have an opinion. Sorry, this is how it is. But then once you hit that 5, 6-year-old, could be some 4-year-olds who, but when you can see they're ready for some training, they can understand the moral reason why. Okay, if we're in a store and I tell a 2-year-old to not run, don't run. And if they run, you pick them up and you put them in the basket and they don't get to get down. There's no conversation to be had. When they are 5 and they take off running, hey, remember, we don't run because the store is full of other people and we would hate to run into somebody or cause somebody to fall or knock things off that would cause more work for the people who work here and are helping us. We give them the moral reason why, and then it's like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, that helps.
Yeah. Oh, that's really good. Kind of talking about parenting at different ages. And so with your kids, they have siblings, and you have a boy. And where Megan and Josh's age difference?
2.5 years.
2.5 years. So what are some...
I thought you were going to ask
how old are they right now? What stage of parenting are
26
you in?
and 29.
So when they were younger, probably about like the elementary school age, preschool age, what were some things you had to deal with the not sibling rivalry, but some issues that arose in them, or something like discussions you had to have with them to play together, or how to respect each other as they were growing up? How did you kind of parent that way with siblings?
A couple of things come to mind here. I think one of the things that surprised me once the second child came along is just how much you did have to teach them about interacting with people and with a new member of the family. I don't know. I kind of thought it would just happen automatically, and it didn't.
You will love her.
Yeah. So when we have to remember that we are training them, that's our job as parents. They are not born knowing everything, and they don't just pick up everything. They don't pick up social cues. They don't pick up, kindness. Hopefully they are picking up some of those things from our modeling, but they don't just automatically know it. So one of the things I noticed early on, Josh, our son, was very good at being an independent player. And so he loved to play Legos or blocks, and he played on his own really well. And Megan, not so much. She wanted to be right up in everybody's business and his business or whatever. So one day I hear Megan screaming, and I go into Josh's room, and I look around. The screaming is coming from his closet, where Megan, she was probably 2, has climbed up on a shelf and is just hanging from the shelf by her fingers and screaming, crying. And Josh is in the middle of his bedroom floor, 5 feet away, playing with Legos. And I'm like, hello. So I get her down, get her safe. And then I'm like, oh, I have to teach this. And so I was like, hey, bud, did you hear your sister screaming? Yeah. Well, that would be a good time for you to stop what you're doing, check on her, and see if she needs help. That would be kind, and that would be compassionate. And when people need help, we stop what we're doing and we help them. And I was like, I'm seriously having to teach this? But yeah, I was seriously, it didn't come natural to him. I think different personalities kind of pick up on some of those things quicker than others. And, he caught on really quick to obedience, whereas Megan did not. But the compassion and the stopping what you're doing to help somebody had to be taught. And then between the 2 of them, we tried to instill really early on that they were best friends. And we referred to them as that. When they treated each other kindly, it was like, that was so good. That's the right way to treat your brother or sister, because they're your best friend. Just trying to instill, friendships and people are going to come and go in our lives, but your siblings, they're going to always be there. And so they're the ones that you want to really attach to. And so we would talk about them being best friends. They didn't always believe us, but we just said it over and over and over. And then something else that we did when they were just kind of getting on each other's nerves, and I could tell they just weren't doing well. Sometimes they just do need a break from each other. It's like, why don't y'all go play in your own rooms for a little bit? Or one of them's working on a project. Why don't you work on that project? And the other one, you come and hang with me, to give them a break. But then also, if they just really got into a fight or whatever, after dealing with the issue of that's not respectful to each other, then we would always end with, okay, tell us 3 things that you love about your brother. What are 3 things that you love about your sister? And it just got them to switch how they were thinking. Instead of looking at what was wrong, just force them to think of what was right. And, we had to do that a lot. And sometimes it would be, nope, you've already said that one. You can't repeat that one because you said that one earlier today. So those are just a few things. But you've got 4 girls. What's been helpful for you guys?
Summer just started, and I literally just 5 days ago sat them on the couch because they were all just, this always. And I said, this can be a good summer or this can be a not fun summer. And the choice is yours. If you treat each other poorly, it's not going to be very fun. But if you get along and let things go and don't always respond back, 5 minutes later, they're all crying again. I was like, okay, let's do it. I had this like, we're training right now. I'm like, come back in. Let's do it again. And I think that's what just, and literally this weekend, I thought, this is just, we're in the hardest years. This is just nonstop. It really is one of those things. I just had the feel of it's going to be a lot and it's not going to solve itself in 2 weeks, but we're in this for the long haul. I want you to be best friends. So however many times you need me to help you sort some stuff, I let them do it, but they need sometimes a training of how to do it.
Yeah.
So that's where it's like, okay, well, or if they come, oh no, she said, I'm like, did you ask her or did you tell her that she did that? Oh, well, no. I'm like, okay, go back and tell her how that made you feel. And then they come back, well, she said, I was like, well, did you do, it's just trying to train them for how to work it with each other, but they need help with that.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's a really good point, because you do have to, if they tried to solve a conflict in their own way and it didn't go well, to sit down and say, okay, did that help your brother or sister, or did it not help your brother or sister? Okay, let's think about how we could do that differently next time. And you do talk it through. Yeah. Maybe if you had used these words or used this tone instead of that, or if you had talked to him instead of going out and slamming the door, or, whatever, that you do have to train and kind of even role play some of these situations. And it's like, okay, let's practice that again.
Yeah. It's like conflict management. It's
Yeah.
like you got to learn. And so sometimes I'll even have both of the two who are doing, I'm like, come down, talk it out in front of me.
Yeah.
And I can help, and then you kind of like, okay, okay, you say this and just do it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. They say, growing up is hard to do, and it is, but parenting the kids who are growing up is way harder. It is harder on the parents to parent than it is on the kids to be parented. And so, but you just have to be in it and be in it for the long haul.
Yeah. We have a 4 and a 2-year-old, so one of them can't formulate sentences yet. So we can't really talk through the problems.
Yeah.
But one thing that I was trying to do with him to help show him that, he used his hands and he hit her because he got frustrated. And she was crying, and I was like, look, she's crying. She's sad. And so I was trying to point out her emotion. And then that makes him feel like tender towards her, because he doesn't want her to be sad. And so he's like, oh, and he gave her a hug. I was like, okay, it was a win in that moment for a 2-year-old to understand, okay, I hurt someone, she's crying. So we're working on pointing out feelings and emotions until we get to the sentence state.
For sure. Yeah.
What are some other things you see with their age difference? Like, are there some things that you're trying to teach them to grow into as siblings, or what's something you're experiencing in this stage?
I think probably the understanding and communication part of it, because they're in such different developmental stages, is the biggest one. And as a parent, I have to adjust how I'm talking to them. So to the 4-year-old, I can use bigger words, fuller sentences, just things that I try to have conversation with her like she's older to explain it. With him, it'll be like from one to the next. And then I'm like, oh, so you kind of have to like switch your mindset. And then they also have 2 very different personalities. And so I've noticed, I don't know, I mean, do you have any tips with that when it comes to ages and developmental stages, but also their personalities and how they respond to a certain correction or?
Yeah, for sure. I think what you're doing is really smart. To the 2-year-old, we're like, oh no, we don't hit. We're gentle, so we don't make people cry or whatever. And you can go into it more with the 4-year-old. But yes, figuring out the boundaries stay the same, but the consequences for pushing past those boundaries may definitely vary from child to child, because what works with one may not work with the other. With Josh, our first one, literally, if we had something, this is going to date me, but we had coffee tables, and you have something on the coffee table with things in it.
Knickknacks.
Yeah. Or you have a dish with mints, or why we had candy dishes on a coffee table with kids, I don't know.
Little strawberry candy.
Yeah, exactly.
Baby boat.
So, but anyway, if there's something within reach, and I could literally tell him, Josh, don't touch, and he wouldn't touch it. And so sweet. And if he did one time, if I swatted his hand, then he literally never did it again. When he was 2, we were playing in the floor, and he got upset about something, and he started laying back, and he was watching me out of the corner of his eye. And I just asked, I said, Joshua, what are you doing? He said, I'm thinking about throwing a fit. I'm like,
Nice.
wow. I said, okay, well, let me just tell you what will happen if you decide to throw a fit. He sat back up. He literally never threw a fit. His sister came along, and there's something on the table. Don't touch.
Oh, it was that kid.
She's going for it. And you swat the hand. She's going for it again.
Oh.
I literally 20 times. She thought about fits and did them multiple times. So, but anyway, I completely lost the question now. Oh, we're talking about different personalities.
Yes.
So what we learned was how we disciplined, or consequences that worked for Josh didn't work for Megan. Mm-hmm. What we learned worked for Megan. She liked being in the middle of things, so isolating her is what worked better than a swat or a spanking or anything like that. Now, if I had isolated Joshua, that would have been a reward. He loved playing by himself. He's like, sweet, I'll do that again. And this means I get to be in my room alone. But if Megan had to go to her room alone, that was just the end of the world. Mm-hmm. So, yes, the expectations are the same, but the consequences or the expressions of it do vary from child to child based on personality.
Yeah, that's great. How do you do with 4 different personalities? Or are they kind of similar in some ways?
No, they're all pretty different. Yeah. Yeah, I think it is. It's just knowing them. It's getting to learn them. And you have a relationship with them. You know what sets them off. You even know their natural bents. Like my oldest is she's a rule follower and like wants to follow the rules. So I found when I correct her, I need to go into it expecting she doesn't know she did wrong, because sometimes she does. And I know that, but she has this heart of like, I'm trying to do the right thing. And if I go hard on it, it's like, I'm so sorry. It's like, okay. But the other ones aren't like that. So it just is learning. A lot of them, my third one is like, I know I did wrong and I did on purpose. I'm
actually kind of proud of it.
She's like, high five.
So, it's just, you just learn them and handle it differently.
Yeah, that's great. Well, this was a great conversation with siblings and doing to different personalities. Thank you guys for tuning in, and always remember that you can parent and we're here to help.